Welcome to At the Table with Tony. My name is Anthony Scillia, better known as Tony Mangia, and today I am excited because this is a topic that is taboo in a way, but yet it's a deeply ingrained part of our Italian, well, American, but also Italian-Canadian culture. And I have the extreme honor and pleasure of welcoming to the show, I'm going to say it wrong, Agata De Santis. Did I say it right?
Close, Agata.
Agata. I know. That's my Jersey accent.
No, you want to say it in Italian. Agata. That's what your brain is doing.
So Agata.
In Italian.
Agata. Okay, I'm gonna screw it up. I know. Right. I'm gonna apologize now. So we are going to learn about the Malocchio tonight. We all know about it, and it's unfortunate because many of us kind of think it's it's witchcraft, it's black magic, but that's not true. And we're gonna get to all we're gonna cover all the bases. So I want to welcome Agata. I want to welcome Miss De Santis to the show. And she, I guess it was in 2010 you came out with a documentary, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
And the name of the documentary is Malocchio, the Evil Eye. And just last year, she came out with this beautiful book called Malocchio, Everything You Ever Wanted to Know About the Evil Eye. And I actually read this I got it in the mail, I guess, just around the holidays. Nice. And I wanted to read it. And so I read it. It's a very quick read, but it's a beautiful read because you really delve into things. So Agata, first of all, thank you for joining us at the table with Tony. Thank
you for inviting me.
This is going to be a fun hour or so. I know we're Italian, so we'll probably talk for a little bit longer than an hour. But I know people have some questions. Somebody already says hi, cuz. Hey, cuz. So I hope that we get some questions. So let's kind of start. Well, first of all, let's start about who is Agata De Santis. I want to know a little bit about you. You are Italian Canadian.
Correct.
You're up in Montreal, Canada. So tell me a little bit about who you are and where your family's from in Italy.
So I was born in Montreal. Both my parents are from Basilicata, so the south. They're both from the same little town called Castelgrande in the province of Potenza. So my parents came in the 60s. They actually knew each other in the town, re-met here, got married. I came along in the 70s. So born and raised in Montreal. I've been here all my life. I work in film. Sort of my day job is film production, documentary, but I write as well. So it was a given that eventually I was going to write a book about something. So that's what happened last year.
So kind of tell us a little bit about how you decided to. We're going to get into the Malocchio a lot, but I want to know more about why did you decide to first of all make the documentary, and then to about 10 or so years later revisit it with the book.
Yeah, so I mean, I was growing up Italian. My mom, my aunts are avid believers in Malocchio, so I would hear little hushed whispers about it. As a lot of people would figure. Like in my family, and this is common, they don't even use the word Malocchio when they talk about it. For my family, they use fascinata. So if someone, they think someone got Malocchio, they use that word. So just, I'm nosy. I would listen, and I knew this thing existed, but I wasn't really sure what it was. And then I had finished university, and I don't remember how I decided to sort of pick up a book on Malocchio, but I was curious. I wanted to know more. There aren't many books on Malocchio. They tend to be very dry, academic, anthropological books, but I read them all. And then I started asking questions, and I realized right away that there's a film here. And so the film became my journey as the filmmaker, trying to figure out what Malocchio is and do I believe in it. And so the film starts in the kitchen with one of my aunts being cured of Malocchio. And then from there, I interviewed my mom, my aunts. I went to New York as well to interview some people. I went to Italy to do some interviews there. And it just sort of became what exactly is this thing and is it real?
Yes. And so, well, I guess in order to answer that question, you have to watch the documentary for you to find out what the answer to that question is.
Well, I mean, there's no absolute. It's sort of, so I used myself as the vehicle. Like, I had to figure out if I believed in it. And I was on the fence when I started researching it. When I was filming it, I was still on the fence, because sort of the academic part of your brain is like, yeah, this doesn't make sense. I need proof.
Yes.
But then you start hearing stories, and there are way too many stories. And so you're like, either everybody's suffering from some kind of mass delusion, or there's something there.
But but really, I mean, I'm from Jersey, North Jersey, and but it's interesting for there to be so many towns in a country, and even this is a global phenomenon in a way.
Yeah, it's
in a way, it's not just
exclusive to Italians. Absolutely not.
But for there to be, however many little towns there are, mainly in southern Italy. Because I know you even touch about I think there was a troupe of actors, and they kind of do a little skit about the Malocchio.
Yes,
and one of the actresses is a northerner, and a northern Italian, I should say. And the family didn't really get it in a way.
Yeah, it's definitely more prevalent in the south of Italy. Yeah.
It's actually, we do have a question. Actually, my wife has a question. She said, would it be comparable to someone saying there is a black cloud over them?
So I always explain Malocchio that you have to think of it on sort of a metaphysical energy level. And I've had people in my life, people I've worked with, people I know, that there's sort of a bad energy around them. And I find it affects me. And that's what you have to think about Malocchio. It's because someone is envious or jealous of something you accomplish, something you have, something that's happened to you. That envy deep down, even though they might be complimenting you, it sort of transfers onto you and affects you that way. The black cloud I feel that sounds more like it's something personal within you. Malocchio happens because someone else puts it on you, but unintentionally. That's very important. That's why there's no cursing. I always correct people when they say things like, oh, I'm going to give that person Malocchio. I'm like, that's not how it works. Okay. That's black magic. That means you have to go to some witch doctor. It's all done unintentionally, but there is that transfer of envy or jealousy onto you. So you don't do it to yourself. Someone else that you've come in contact with gives it to you.
Let's talk a little bit about, so what is Malocchio? What are some of the historical, I guess we could talk about the worldwide historical aspects of it before we delve into, what it is for our culture. So like you said, Malocchio kind of dates back probably thousands of years.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's references to the evil eye in ancient Egyptian artifacts and artwork. The Turkish community believes in it. The Greek community, you have references to the evil eye in parts of Asia. So, I mean, it's been around forever. So really what you have to think of it is this way. Malocchio happens when someone you bump into, because of their jealousy or envy of, like I said before, something you have, something you've accomplished, they will inadvertently give you Malocchio. So all of a sudden, maybe 20, 30 minutes after you bump into this person, you start feeling a weird headache, a stomach ache, or like this weird overall fatigue, unrest. And what needs to happen is it needs to be cured, or else it's just kind of going to linger. So the idea is that, people of Italian origin, a lot of, I always say, if you're of Italian origin, someone knows how to cure it. You just, maybe it never came out because we don't talk about it, but trust me, start asking around someone and you have to just ask, your mom, your aunt, the neighbor, the Italian neighbor, and then you need that person to sort of diagnose and cure it, and it's a ritual that they do to get rid of it. But it's really that it's someone's envious or jealous of something, and they transfer that energy onto you, and it results in a physical ailment.
But like you said, it is unintentional. So they're not thinking, theyey're not saying, that son of a gun,
I'm gonna give him Malocchio.
Yeah. Because I think that's a mix. I think that's a bit of a misconception. I think that people think that they give the horns and they say, I'm giving you the Malocchio, but really that's not really what the Malocchio is.
No, because it doesn't. I mean, that people.
That's more, I guess, cursing, right? In a way.
Cursing. And, there are people who believe in cursing and all that, but that's like black magic. You have to go see someone, usually pay them, and be like, I want to curse so-and-so because they stole my boyfriend, or, our business fell apart, whatever it is. So that's black magic. Malocchio no reference to it anywhere associates it to black magic, because it's this unintentional transfer of illness.
And even the cure, the person that can cure the Malocchio, they're not to take money or monetary payment. You could give them, if you bake a cake, give them a cake. You have something from your garden.
Yeah, and like in the film, when we were in Eboli, I interviewed an elderly woman who wasn't working anymore, and she kind of, she wasn't very wealthy, but people were knocking on her door all the time to cure Malocchio, and she never asks for money. It's just understood you should bring her a gift. So, back in the day, like if it was a farmer visiting her, they would bring something from their crops. If they raise chickens, they'll bring her a couple dozen eggs. It's that kind of thing. And also what happens is, holiday time, if there's this woman in your life that helps you, you'll remember her. You'll bring her a gift at Christmas time. You'll bring her a gift at Easter. And there were certain women, I mean, that's what they lived off of. They were very poor in these small towns, and they lived off of that. But yeah, they'll never ask for money. And if anybody says, oh, I can cure your Malocchio, but it'll cost you $50,
walk away.
Yeah, run. That's not supposed to be at all. And so that's why a lot of times the people who cure Malocchio are in your life. They're a relative, a friend,
your aunt, your mother.
Yeah.
Now, here's a question. Is it, because most of the people that I know that can cure Malocchio are women. Is it a thing that only women do, or can men cure the Malocchio?
It's traditionally, it just happens that it's women, but men can do it. I think it falls under the category of caregiver. And so traditionally it's the women, in the Italian culture, we go back generations, who took care? It was the women. So, and what ends up happening is, because the cure is taught, what ends up happening is the person who knows how to cure Malocchio kind of decides who they're going to pass that knowledge to. And it kind of makes sense if you think of it, that if it's a woman, she'll pass it on to a daughter, a niece, a godchild. It's just like, it's one of these really interesting female-driven traditions. But no, there are guys that know how to cure it. And I would argue a lot of the men believe it. And what happens is they'll be like, go talk to your aunt. We need to call your grandmother. Like, that's what ends up happening. I think they also just let the women take care of it. It's almost like, oh my God, I can't deal with this.
Well, because I think, like you said, because the women for so many generations, so many thousands of years, they were in the house, so they kind of knew everybody. They knew the kids when they had the headache. They knew when the husband was a little irritated or agitated. Yeah. So they knew when they could perform this curing ritual.
Yeah, and there's an intimacy in this, right? In that, I always tell the story that if let's say I'm at a party and all of a sudden I mention that I have a weird headache, or all of a sudden I'm not myself, it's the women that'll notice. They'll be like, oh, something's going on. And they'll sort of take you and hush you away into a kitchen or something, like away from the crowd, because they're like, we have to take care of this. I think maybe just traditionally the women were just more attentive to the temperament of the people in their family.
Now, let me ask you this question. So we know that Malocchio is given unintentionally.
Yes.
But why do we talk about it then? You know what I mean? So if we know, is it our subconscious that we know that, okay, this person has a beautiful house, I want that house, but like, how is that? You know what I mean? Like, how is that unintentional in a way?
Well, no, the unintentional part is that you don't wish ill on that person.
Okay.
At the end, like, I think the person is well aware. Oh, I'm jealous. She's got a gorgeous house. I'm absolutely envious. But I think they don't want to give you, like, they don't want to cause you physical harm. They're just jealous of something you have.
So that jealousy is what gives you.
Yeah.
What transfers. So the jealousy, that jealous energy then per se is transferred to the person that that person's jealous of, and it can manifest as a headache, as a stomach ache,
or I would say like a weird overall feeling.
They even say what, like tiredness?
Yeah, like a weird fatigue,
malaise,
like a lethargic feeling that comes out of, and that's the trick. It's quick. Like all of a sudden you're like, you're dancing on the dance floor, and 10 minutes later you're like, I can barely move my arms. It's that quick. It's that sudden.
Now, in my family, one of my aunts, she's able to cure the Malokia. So I know there's always was stories that one of her uncles would have a friend. Whenever he would get a headache, he would have my uncle call my aunt to have him to have him cured. And then, but like you said, she would do the curing ritual, and within minutes, the guy was back out.
Yeah, so everything's fast. It happens fast, and then if you cure it, obviously it'll linger if you don't do anything. But if the curing ritual happens, the cure is fast. It's quick. It's a quickie. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about this curing ritual. Now, I know that they say, I know that some of I guess the legend is that you can only pass it on to a person at midnight on Christmas Eve. Some
Not
say
everybody believes that, but some do.
Some say you can never write it down. It can only be passed orally. So kind of is there a middle ground, or what is I guess what are some of the rituals, if we're allowed to talk about, are we allowed to talk about them?
Yeah. So some people are it's really difficult to get them to talk about it openly, but we have to think of it this way. This is an oral tradition that's been passed on like over countless generations. So what happens? It's like, the telephone line game. Start with one sentence and you pass it on, and by the time you get to the 10th person, the phrase is completely different. That's how we have to think about the curing ritual. So I always say, as many towns as there are in Italy, that's how many variations there are. And I would say even more, because what ends up happening is every person that's taught the cure eventually adds their own little
like telephone.
Yeah, and it could be, the ritual's too long, so I'm going to cut it in half. It could be they forgot a part of it, so then they start mixing it up. But it works, because I think it's just the incantations are so different from one another, and they tend to mix in like Roman Catholic prayers with kind of weird limericks. Or sometimes people just do like a Hail Mary or a sign of the cross, and that's it. So the variation isn't crazy, but the ritual is kind of the same in that there's two rituals. Either it's just incantation. So as soon as you start doing the incantation, the person doing the incantation, the curing, they'll be able to diagnose if you have malocchio. They might start tearing up or yawning a lot. Those are the signs. And then the trick is you just have to finish the incantation and think about the person. And by the time you're at the end, the person should start feeling better. If it's really bad, like my mother knows how to cure it, and she says, like, if it's really bad, she might have to do a second or third round of incantations.
But doesn't it in a way also take something out of the curer? Like it kind of makes them a little, like they almost take on.
Like for my mom, like she'll start tearing up and yawning, and like it could be very intense. Some people say that a woman I had interviewed in Eboli who does this often in Italy, like she had said she can't, even if she had a lineup of people at the door, she can't do it day in, day out, because she kind of takes on some of that negative energy. So you're fatigued. So some people talk about that. Others don't. It's so varied. And then the second variation of the cure is the famous bowl of water. So there's a bowl of water, and then again, you'll start doing incantations. And as you do that, you're dropping olive oil drops. And while you're doing the incantation, the idea is that if the oil disperses and disappears, the person has malocchio. If it doesn't disperse, they don't. And as they do the incantation, as they do the diagnosis, it's also the cure at the same time. And even the bowl of water and olive oil, I've seen variations where they put the bowl on the person's head. I've seen people use like salt, like they'll make the sign of the cross with salt. I've seen people, use scissors and stab the oil. Like again, even that ritual that sounds simple, so many variations. Some people say after the ritual's done, you got to throw the water out the door or down the sink. The variety I find is quite beautiful. But in the end, it's just the person, the cure is like kind of focused on you. They're doing some kind of ritual, and that's going to alleviate and cure the malocchio.
So we have a question. Does anyone have the power to give the malocchio? So like we said, they don't, it's all unintentional.
Yeah, and that's where I think there's been a lot of misconception, because I think people over the years, I would say like our generation and younger, they've mixed up the cursing with malocchio. Part of the problem is because it's not talked about openly. So you kind of maybe start, like maybe as you grew up, you heard stories of, because I've heard crazy stories of people being cursed. Like, it's scary. Like, I don't even like to, like, I made a conscious decision when I made the film to not even delve into that for two reasons. I was a little scared of it. And also it was a 1 hour film, and I'm like, I can't cover malocchio and cursing. But no one can intentionally give malocchio.
So yes, like you said, it's just people kind of get the two. They kind of, like you said, they unintentionally merge the two, the cursing and the malocchio.
Yeah, and I've heard people say like, oh, well, that person always gives me malocchio. To me, there's a weird energy between the two of you. That's why that's happening. But it's not like that person's going around intentionally giving malocchio. That's absolutely not how it works. Yeah.
And here's another. So this is. I used to get headaches, and I remember when I was younger in Italy, my grandmother took a glass of water over my head, and if it bubbled, the headache was leaving me. Is that something?
Yeah. So the bubbling is. I've never heard of the bubbling, so that's interesting. But absolutely, that sounds like she was doing some kind of malocchio ritual.
So again, I mean, there could be these rituals that we don't even know about in these little towns in Italy, correct? So whatever works for that.
Yeah, I mean, there are similarities. There, like I said, there's some kind of incantation going on. And the thing is, the healer believes they believe they have the power to cure you. And by doing this incantation, this ritual, they're in the process of curing you. Yeah.
So now there are also, I guess, amulets or little things that people wear.
Very nice.
Jewelry pieces. I have my
I see the horseshoe with the cornetto. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about, I guess, protection against the malocchio. So these are these little amulets and these little I don't even know what you would call them, novelties in a way. But they're not novelties because
they're protective amulets. Yeah.
So yeah, please talk a little bit about, so I guess first of all, there are what in the Italian, we can kind of have three.
We go big. We have three. One wasn't enough. Two wasn't enough. There are three amulets in the Italian culture. The most popular one, the most common one is the cornetto, which I often find I have to correct people. It's not a pepper. There it is. It's a horn. Very important distinction. And that one I find has become, in the last generation or two, especially I think in North America, but even if you walk the streets of Naples, it's become kind of like a souvenir, good luck charm. Oh, here's my souvenir for my trip to Italy or to Little Italy. But it's actually a protective amulet. And the trick is with amulets, you should wear it near the skin. Some people believe it should be gifted to you. It's more powerful if it's gifted to you rather than you go and buy it yourself. Some people, for example, might carry. A lot of people carry amulets on their keychain. So the idea is that if you feel you just had a conversation with someone and you're like, I'm not sure if this person, there's a jealousy there. As long as you touch the amulet, that's your protection. So the corno is one. Then we have this baby, the mano cornuto, which everybody, of course, thinks it's like a very rock symbol. But in fact, the guy who sort of started using it on stage, well, guess what? His grandmother was Italian. And his grandmother was an avid believer in malocchio, and he just kind of thought it was a cool symbol. And so he started using it. So that's an amulet. And then the third one, he's the funny little guy in the top hat, the gobetto. And so
this is one of my favorites, though.
Yeah, and it's kind of sad because the origins are a little sad. So he's
Really?
always usually in a top coat, top hat. He's got the hump on his back, and usually his bottom is a cornetto, and then his hands. So in his two hands he might have a horseshoe, an umbrella, another corno, the mano cornuto. So there's something in.
He has all three.
Yeah. So what they say is he's the most potent because he mixes everything up. But the origins are kind of sad in that, people that had, humps on their backs were kind of considered like they were the oddballs in the towns. And some people believe like if you rub their hump, it would give you good luck and like protect you. It's kind of a sad origin. And that's how he got turned into an amulet.
But also, isn't it that
I love him? He's adorable, but I don't like the origin story.
But isn't it also something that if he's holding the horseshoe in his hand, it's taking the luck from, and he has his fingers pointed. It's taking the luck from the horseshoe and giving it to the person. Is that any truth to that?
Yeah, some people believe that you kind of transfer the energy and like you kind of like you throw it right back at them. I'm of the belief that if you look at the mano cornuta or the horn, I like the idea that they pierce out the eyes, because the idea is that, it's called the evil eye. The energy comes out through the eyes, which makes sense because if you think of envy or jealousy, it's based on what they see, what they observe. So of course the energy technically comes from the eyes. So I always saw those amulets as a way to pierce the eye. So if you pierce the glare, you stop the energy. But the horseshoe, some people believe. Now, these are the three main amulets, but there's all kinds of things. But the horseshoe is one of those things where the idea is that you kind of boomerang the energy back to the person. But you won't give them malocchio. You're just kind of throwing the back energy back to them.
Because I even thought that the significance of, because usually they say like for luck, a horseshoe should for money should be like the up, right? So you're catching or you're collecting the luck or the money. But what is there a significance of having it? Is it because it's transferring that?
Yeah, it's because that's the thing. Like, I remember growing up hearing about horseshoes as good luck charms. It's supposed to be up. Instead, any symbolism you see associated to malocchio, it's the other way. It's just the boomerang effect. It's not the horn, it goes up. But again, not everybody believes in that. It's really like over the years, there's so many amulets. But the horseshoe kind of gets associated with the cornetto often, yeah.
So really, I guess it's a personal what you maybe were raised with.
Yeah, there's there's the one common belief. It's toccaferro. So the idea was that if you thought someone was, and it could happen during the conversation. Let's say you and I just had a chat, and afterwards you're like, I don't know, she seemed a little too. I didn't like her vibe. Like you can go touch iron, and that was a belief. I also believe that in the south of Italy there were a lot of people who were farmers.
Mm-hmm.
They just had iron tools around them, so it was easy. Like nowadays, like if I have to touch iron, it's tougher.
You're trying to look.
There's no iron around me. Whereas back then, chances were if you were on a farm or you had some kind of land, there were iron. So I think that's what happens. Like. Things were just like horns. If now we buy the plastic horns or the gold horns, but again, livestock, all you needed to take was one of your livestock's horns and turn it into an amulet.
But it's actually interesting because my family, I come from which I'm not. It isn't my job, but I come from a long line of blacksmiths. So we go back to, I would say at least I've traced the family line to at least the 1700s, and they were all Sicilian blacksmiths. And they would travel throughout Sicily or this one area of Sicily, and they would, open up shops and I guess practice their craft. So in a way, I guess, but also certain, I guess, what would you say, certain careers or certain, I'm trying to think of the word here, not careers, but
like if you're from an agricultural community. Which a lot of, if we think of our ancestors 2-3 generations back in the South, a lot of them worked the land. It made sense that they would use things that were accessible to them.
Well, the one thing that I don't like when people say, it's a backward way of thinking, or it's a backward, it's a backward mentality. That actually is very hurtful.
Well, this is how I explain that. You know, the evil eye belief kind of falls in the world of superstition. And statistically, everyone has superstitions. It's not like, oh, the uneducated. You know, we've got hockey players that, you know, don't shave or wear the same pair of socks throughout a tournament. We have people that, you know, when they write an exam or sign an important document, they have to use their favorite pen. You go for a job interview, you have your lucky shirt. Well, guess what? That's all superstition. And these are all ways of sort of dealing with the unknown, dealing with something bad that could happen. I need to protect myself. So I read there's a great, it's an academic book, but I found it fascinating. It's called The Psychology of Superstition. And you know, there are all kinds of studies, and he's a professor from Connecticut. I think he's retired now. And they found, you know, when they started doing research, is, you know, Harvard grads are just as superstitious as backward cultures, whatever that means. And he also talks about the psychology is that, you know, science doesn't explain everything. And that's what superstition helps. It helps you cope with the unexplainable. It helps you cope with uncertainty. So Malocchio kind of falls into that world, in that, why is my infant all of a sudden not sleeping at night? Why do I have this weird headache that came out of nowhere? It's sort of this anxiety about the unknown, and the culture has come up with this belief system.
Again, I am Anthony Scillia, better known as Tony Mangia. We are at the table tonight with Agata De Santis. She is a award-winning filmmaker and author, and we're talking about her documentary entitled Malocchio, the Evil Eye, as well as her brand new book, Malocchio, Everything You Ever Wanted to Know About the Evil Eye. And I guess this is a good set. I have a kind of a long question here.
Cool.
So this is from Michelina. She said, my mom would say the incantation Santi Cosmo Damiano, un medico in uno sano fa passare quest malocchio, ba 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 ba. What are some other incantations? I guess she has a couple of part questions. So are there other incantations?
Oh my God, yeah. There are. So in my book, I have a few incantations. So some people, it's as basic as using a few Roman Catholic prayers. Others mix it with incantations, and they're kind of silly. Like, they're silly sometimes. Like the one I included in my book, I have my mother's curing ritual. And I remember the first time she divulged it to me was when we were filming for the documentary. And I remember, like, we were writing it down, and I'm like, Mom, this incantation makes no sense. Like, it's this weird story. And she's like, oh yeah, but that's what I was taught. And so it's weird. It's now it usually rhymes. So there are so many others. It sounds like it's something her mom probably was taught, and yeah, it works. She also asks, who gives you the evil eye over and over? Do you have to do it again? Yes. So that, I mean, it's if someone gives you malocchio and you get cured, it's not a cure-all against that person.
So you can still get it again.
Yeah. I mean, someone I know, she's my cousin's daughter, so she's like my cousin once removed, whatever. And so she, when she was younger, was working. She had, like, you know, a part-time job during school, and she was convinced that a certain coworker would give her malocchio. And she said, because every time I worked with that person and I got home, I had this weird headache, and she would call her nonna to do the cure. So, and that was continuous. Like, it was every time she worked with this person, it happened. So yeah, unfortunately, you have to just keep
plugging, as they say.
Every time this happens. Now, I would argue, and someone like my mother, an avid believer, would argue, is if this person constantly gives you malocchio, you need to protect yourself. That's where the protection, the amulets come in. So obviously, like, why are you not protecting yourself? And my mom will do this. Like, if you go to her and say, I think I have malocchio, the first thing she'll be like, why weren't you wearing an amulet?
Oh, okay.
So that's the thing. If you know this person, so obviously there's some kind of relationship that involves jealousy there, and this person is constantly jealous of you. You need to protect yourself. That's the thinking. So you got to have that amulet close to you. After you have a chat with that person, you got to you got to touch that amulet, or just keep it near the skin. Wear it as a necklace.
Now, I kind of want to talk a little bit, because I know that you touched upon it in the documentary, is that, in a way, because it is a superstition, it kind of I guess goes away from, or goes against, in a way, the teachings of the church. When I say the church, I mean the Roman Catholic Church. So, but yet in a way, there are so many prayers, and there's so much invocation of the saints and of our Lord. So, can you kind of explain, kind of explain that a little bit, the relationship?
Yeah, so this is one of the oddest anomalies in the belief in the Italian culture. The Roman Catholic Church is absolutely against the belief in the evil eye. They will tell you it doesn't exist. You need to believe in God, not in this mumbo jumbo. A lot of avid believers, if we think of our parents' and grandparents' generation, have no problem being avid Catholic, avid
devout Catholic
practitioners of Catholicism, and avid believers in Malocchio. If anything, you'll see them wear the sign, like a cross and an amulet, a corno, on the same keychain, which for the church is a faux pas. It's just this weird anomaly, and the avid believers have no problems mixing the two. I give the example of when babies get baptized, as they're being dressed on. I always say it's like the godmother's job. One of her jobs, when they're dressing the baby, on the nightshirt, they'll put pin an amulet on the baby, and it usually has three amulets. There's the cross, there's a corno, and then usually it's like either like a folded cloth, something to do with a saint, and you hide it in a folded cloth, and it's these 3 pins, and the baby will wear it under the baptismal gown. And then the important thing is, when they go to church during the baptism, the priest will unwittingly, because he doesn't know it's there, but I'm sure he does, when he blesses the baby, he's blessing the amulets, therefore making them even more potent. So they mix the two. And I had actually interviewed, when I was filming in Eboli, I had interviewed a jeweler, and he, of course, Italian jeweler in the South, they sell the amulets, and he's like, I had a lot of clients come in and be like, my godchild or my great niece, whatever, is being baptized, and I want to buy like an amulet. And he would have to be like, you have to keep this hidden from the priest. Like, don't. They're like, why? And they're like, are you kidding? Like, they're going to give you a lecture. They're going to lecture you if the kid shows up. Let's say a child being, having like a first communion, and you've just gifted them like a gold chain with an amulet. He's like, the priest is going to yell at you. And his thing was like, people just didn't seem to realize that they can't mix. It's a weird culture thing for Italians, really, really weird. But I always joke that the priests know. They just like they can't agree with you. They have to follow the doctrine, and they're just.
But really, if you think about it, some Southern Italians, especially in maybe the older generations, were some of the most devout Catholics.
Yeah, still are.
Ever. Yeah, you think about, they're going to church every day. They're saying the novenas. They're praying their rosary.
Saints. Everybody has like their patron saint.
Padre Pio.
Yeah, of course.
But really, so in a way, it's just it really is so ingrained in who they are, in their DNA, even.
Oh.
Like,
if you bring it up and you're like, but should you be believing in Malocchio? Like, the church is against it. They're like, why? Why can't it? Like, they don't see they have no issue. The church has an issue, but the believers don't.
And why do you think that is? Just because it's a part of the culture for 1,000 years?
Yeah, for the church,
well, no, I'm saying more for the believer.
Oh, well, it's so. My aunt once told me, and I think it was when I was interviewing her for the film, is she's like, you have to remember back in the day in these poor towns, like, we didn't have money to go to the doctor. So if a kid had a headache, if a kid had an earache or something, you kind of crossed your fingers that the lady down the street who knew how to cure Malocchio could help them. And so it was survival. And if these incantations seem to work, they seem to alleviate some kind of physical pain, why would you not continue practicing? It's really that, like, she saw it that way. She saw it as, you know, we couldn't afford the doctor, but we could bring a dozen eggs to, you know, the old lady down the street who knew how to cure malocchio.
We have another question here. This says Nicoletta here. Have you experienced malocchio?
Yeah. So here I'll tell a story. So according to my mother, I experienced it as a child, but I don't obviously remember that. But as an adult, I had never experienced it. And even when I was filming the documentary, I was on the fence if I believed or not. And part of the problem was I had never experienced it firsthand. I had heard tons of stories, but I never experienced it. So the first time I think it happened to me was when we were editing the film, the documentary. And I tell the story in the film, and I tell the story in the book. And it was as simple as we were editing. I get home. My mom and my aunt were having coffee together, and I just felt really tired. I assumed it was I had the long week of editing. We were nearing a deadline, but I was not hungry, and I had this overall fatigue that I had never experienced before. And I skipped dinner. I went to bed early. I was like, oh my God, something's like, I need to sleep this off. And I get into my bedroom, and 20, 30 minutes later, I'm like back to my old self, which I found weird. And I remember like I got up and I did some work on the computer. We were editing. I was working on the script, and I thought nothing of it. I was like, okay, whatever fatigue came over me went away. The next morning, my mother checks in on me, and she's like, oh, how were you feeling last night? And I was like, it was really weird. I said, after I tried to get to sleep, and I said how as I was trying to get to sleep, like I couldn't focus. Like I was in bed, and I'm usually, as soon as I hit the pillow, I fall asleep. I don't have trouble falling asleep. But that night, I couldn't. It's like my brain was buzzing. I just couldn't. And I said, but it was weird. Like 20, 30 minutes later, I was back to my old self. And she's like, well, yeah, you had malocchio. And I was like, what are you talking about? And she said, well, after you left, my aunt, she's like, your aunt was like, you know what? I think me pensa stata fascinata, as they say. And my mom knew how to do the cure. So she's like, I did it. I joke about in the book. I got mad at her because I was like, why didn't you tell me? I could have called my camera guy who would have filmed it. And she said, well, she's like, I kind of wanted to see how real it was. She's like, I kind of wanted to see if it worked, you not knowing what I was doing.
Now, did she have, does a person have to be present to be cured of the malocchio?
So it varies. So in my mother's case, the best is if she touches you, but the alternative is, so because I was with them at the table, she just needed to touch something I recently came into contact with. So she may have touched a chair or something, and that's enough for my mom. But some people, you don't even need that. Like in my mother's case, you cannot call her and be like, oh, I think I have malocchio. And she's like, okay, but I haven't seen you in a while. My mother has to touch. Other people know, like you can, one of my aunt's sisters on the other side of the family, I can call her and I haven't seen her in months and she can do it. So that's a variation. And that seems to be an adaptation with North American Italians, because when I interviewed the woman in Eboli, the practitioner, and I told her about how people call, she was like, no, I need to see the person. I need to touch them. And my theory there is, back in the hometown, the towns were small. So the person you knew how to cure malocchio was either in your household or down the street. If I think of Montreal, I mean, we're like, 3 million people in the greater Montreal area. I'm not in walking distance of a cure. So I think the adaptation of calling the cure on the phone, I think was adapted by the immigrant communities who moved into bigger cities and were not together anymore. So that varies. But for my mom, for example, she can't do I can't call her on the phone. I haven't seen her in a week and be like, Ma, I have malocchio. She's like, well, you gotta come over. I gotta touch you. So yeah.
Actually, and that's what one of my cousins brought up here. She said, Aunt, my mom was taught the malocchio prayer, and people still call her.
Love it. Yes, of course.
And she said that she had to learn it on Christmas Eve. But again,
yeah, so that I came across when I started researching for the film. So in my family circle, that's not a belief. But yeah, some people believe midnight at Christmas Eve is the only time you can be taught. And some people believe that there has to be a renewal of the learning every so many years, which is interesting. Other people believe that there's a limit to the number of people you can teach. So the trilogy comes, I think, because of the Roman Catholic tradition. The trilogy is often comes into play. So there's people that believe, like, I can only teach 3 other people, and then I lose my power. So when I teach the 3rd person, I will lose my power. Not everyone believes that. Some do. But that's why one thing I do find is people that know how to cure it, they're very careful, very selective about who they will transfer that information to. Like, they feel it as a responsibility. And that means if I'm going to pass it on to you, I trust that you're going to take that responsibility seriously. And that I find that seems to be common.
So that's a more of a common theme.
I find it common again amongst healers. Yeah, they take the pass. Not only have they taken the knowledge seriously, they've taken the passing on of the knowledge very seriously.
So it's not like you're going to be sitting on the corner saying, "Hey, you want to learn the you want to learn? You want to learn?"
No, it's and usually it's someone you're close to, someone usually obviously someone younger, because the idea is that you need to pass it on to the younger generation.
So like you said, a daughter, a niece.
It's often to a daughter, a grandchild, a niece, a godchild. Often that's a strong bond. Yeah.
Now, here's another question: the corno that one wears, can it be gold, or does it have to be the standard red and gold corno? So I think they mean the plastic one.
Yeah, it's what's important is the shape, not what it's made of. So there's plastic, there's gold, silver, there's coral, there's animal bone. Some cornos are made of animal bone. The material doesn't matter.
Actually, here's one on the screen now. What is that?
That's a cool one. So I would say in the last decade, the corno kind of became fashionable. I think, who was it? Was it Gucci? Some high designer started creating amulets. Like they got to go through, every once in a while, they got to change up all their pendants. So that's one I actually found that in a button store in New York City. Really? Yeah, and it's just meant as a decorative pendant, but when I saw it, I was like, A, it was pretty, but B, this is an amulet. People don't realize it.
So here's a picture we were talking earlier about, about the baptisms.
Yeah, so that's me watching over my little brother, and his godmother just finished dressing him, and so I'm sure everyone has this picture, right? It's such an important part of the ritual of the baptism, where it's the godmother dressing the child, and we have that added responsibility of she will have pinned the amulet, the 3 amulets to the baby's undergarments.
So that is the godmother's job in a way.
Yeah, it's always the godmother, and then there's always the photo op.
But why is that?
I think it just became the tradition that it's kind of part of her responsibility. I mean, it's a baptism. It's about the godparents more than the parents. That day, like it's their day, and it just somehow it became the ritual that they're part of the dressing. And because they were part of the dressing, like in my family, not only did the godmother dress the baby and put on the amulet, it's the godmother that bought the amulet for the baby. That's part of, if you agree to be a godmother, part of your job is to purchase the 3 amulets and have it ready to pin it on the baby.
So it's not just saying, okay, show up at 12 o'clock on Sunday.
No, you have 2 things to take care of before you show up, and one of them is purchasing the amulet. Yeah.
But if you think about it, in a way, being a godparent is a job. It's because you are supposed to help that child, I guess, through life in a way. So be another.
I mean, what better way than to protect them on this day? I mean, the thing about the baptism is, that baby's going to be complimented all day, right? The baby's like, oh, she's cute, she's so adorable. So she or him is going to be susceptible technically to malocchio. So it's part of protecting the child that day.
That's just wild. So again, my name is Anthony Scillia, better known as Tony Mangia. We are sitting down with Agata De Santis. She is a award-winning filmmaker and an author. We're talking all about the malocchio tonight. But I also want to talk a little bit about, I know we're talking, so if you still have, we can still take questions, but I also want to talk, you have a couple of websites. So let's talk a little bit about, so what is Redhead Productions?
So Redhead Productions is my little production company. I make produce documentaries and direct. And so if you go to the website, you'll see some of the films we've made, we're about to make, and I'm also selling the book through the website.
And I know that I was remiss in that I I didn't realize that I could bought Terra Mia, so I bought that the other day, and I wish I would have watched that because I would like to have talked a little bit about that documentary. So can you tell us a little bit about some of your other documentaries? So are they all Italian?
It's happening. I don't plan it. It's just, you know, it's just when I direct documentary films, I like to sort of take on subjects that interest me. So I do tend to veer towards Italian stories, but it's never, I don't do it consciously. It just kind of happens. Terra Mia came out in 2018, and the premise of the film is looking at the future of the Italian community in Quebec. We're hitting third, fourth generation immigrants. Montreal is a very multicultural city. But what happens to an immigrant community when, you know, I was born in Montreal. The next generation is, you know, their parents are born in Montreal. So you're very removed from the motherland. Can you still call it in a community, and what will survive, what won't survive? So again, it's kind of my journey, just meeting people, mostly young people in the community, trying to figure out what the future is. And it's almost like an observation / essay on what the future is. You know, I have you know, issues with I call them the old boys club, that still runs you know, these guys still run the Italian organization. It's still unfortunately run by way too many men, not enough, and older men. And so they're not willing to let go of the reins, and that I see as a problem because they're not, they want to run the organizations the way they ran them in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And that's not our generation.
Yeah, transferring to the next generation.
Yeah, like we've adapted, we've changed. It's normal. Like, you know, a lot of these guys were born in Italy and came here as young adults sometimes. I was born in Montreal. I always find when someone says, "Oh, you're Italian," I always find I have to tell them, well, my parents are Italian because I'm Canadian. I was born in Montreal. Yeah, I've been to Italy, you know, 4 or 5 times. I have relatives there. I have a connection to Italy, but it's cultural, it's nostalgic. My reality is Montreal. And so there are practices that these guys still do that I'm just like, guys, you need to, it's enough already. Like the young people don't relate. And then, you know, I've heard this complaint, you know, I also, when I started working as a freelance writer, I was covering the Italian community for our local English paper. Mm-hmm. And so that's when I got to meet people of these organizations at a young age, like in my mid-20s. And they're like, oh, they were complaining that young people weren't interested. And I, you know, when you start observing what they were doing, I was like, well, I'm not interested. I'm just here because I'm covering, you know, I have to write a story about what you're doing for the paper. So I find, and I always tell them, I said, you're not offering the young generation something that's interest to them. Like it's, mm-hmm. And you guys refuse to see what they're interested in because it's not just Italian anymore that they're interested in. There's a mix. So so I have, you know, I run this website called italocanadese.com, and it's like an online magazine. And I say it's like, it's only in English. It's not in Italian because my target audience are people of Italian origin living in Canada. And sometimes when I contact an artist, let's say I want to profile a singer-songwriter, and he's of so my thing is there has to be an Italian connection, but it doesn't have to be about Italianness. So sometimes I'll contact someone and, you know, he's of Italian origin. I'm thinking of one singer in particular, and I had contacted him and he's like, oh, but, you know, I sing in English. My songs are not about Italian culture. I'm like, no, you're Italian Canadian. That's it. That's all I need. And I find like that's where the old boys club don't get it, is that when we have festivals, when we have events, you cannot just feature Italian. You have to feature some Italian because we're there for that reason. But you got to go a little beyond. So, you know, and I find that's where the problem is. And that's what the film looks like, kind of. And sort of the resolution of the film is that my essay is kind of like, I think the culture will survive, the community, but it's going to evolve. And you have to accept it. Like you can't.
How strong is the Italian community in Montreal? Are there still a lot of restaurants and clubs?
Yeah, I mean, the community is about 300,000 of Italian origin, right? Some is second, third, fourth generation, but we number at about 300,000. We do have a little Italy. It has transformed over the years. Although I'm happy to say that there are a lot of young entrepreneurs coming in and opening up restaurants and cafes, and those seem to be doing well because it caters to the new generation. Mm-hmm. So it might be an Italian restaurant, but it's not old school Italian. So that I find I've seen a rejuvenation in our little Italy. But what's weird is so we have one main strip, but the area that's being revitalized are the side streets, which is interesting. But hopefully, eventually, everybody will go back to Saint Laurent when everything's shutting down.
So are there other say little enclaves?
Yeah, absolutely.
Just outside of Montreal, or
we have there are certain pockets of the greater Montreal area, so that includes the island and the surrounding areas. There are definitely little enclaves. Italian churches. We have 4, maybe even 5 Italian churches, and then across the street there's the Italian bakery, there's the Italian flower shop. There are some really great Italian restaurants all over the island. There's still a lot of associations, like my parents' association. The association of people from my parents' hometown. Some are dying off just because they weren't able to adapt. And so it was just still it was still our grandparents' generation. Mm-hmm. And, as they're passing away, they're just less and less members, but some are thriving. We have organizations. We have 2 community centers. They're both struggling. And I think it's because they're just not adapting. They don't know how. I think it's almost like I feel like the upper management needs to make way for the new generation. And I think it'll happen. But, we go nuts during a World Cup or a Euro Cup.
But now
we all congregate to our favorite Italian cafes and neighborhoods. It's fun. We do the parade when we win. But there's Italian school Saturday mornings.
Really?
Yeah. Well, now with COVID, it's kind of moved virtually, but no, there's pre-COVID, and I'm hoping post-COVID, there's Saturday morning classes for kids. So yeah, it's a strong community, but it's changing.
But was Montreal part of, because in America we had that first diaspora, the late 1800s, early 1900s, and then there was a second wave after World War II, so 50s, 60s, 70s. Did that same thing happen in Canada and Montreal?
Yeah. So in Canada, the biggest wave is post World War II.
Oh, really? So it wasn't.
We had some. There were some people immigrating before World War I and then before World War II. Much smaller community, and they had a tough time. They, it's like the new immigrants of today. They suffered racism. The locals didn't like them. They complained that who are these guys coming in and opening up their own shops and restaurants. Mm-hmm. And then after World War II, the 50s and 60s is when we had the biggest wave of migration, just because Canada opened up the doors because they needed manual laborers.
Oh, so in a way, it kind of, not that Canada was delayed, but delayed from the way the America was.
In terms of big wave, yeah, I would say, because like I said, there were Italians that came before World War II, but a much smaller group.
Because our big wave was the initial wave. I mean,
obviously, yeah, exactly. That's different, yeah.
Because it's actually interesting. My wife's family, some of her uncles went to Canada, and then her family came to the America, to New Jersey area. So there was even within the last 50, 60 years, they still went to both places. Actually, one of her uncles still lives up in Canada. So I mean, I haven't been there in years.
Our first churches were built over 100 years ago. There's we have a Sons of Italy chapter in Montreal. It celebrated its 100th anniversary 1 or 2 years ago. So there were the oldest community center, the Casa d'Italia, was built in 1936. So there was a small group, but the biggest wave was after World War II.
That's what. So Italo Canadese. So talk a little bit more about that. So that's kind of just writing about the
online magazine. It's an online magazine, and we just write about all things Italian Canadian. Sometimes there's a very strong Italian connection. Other times it's an artist or someone we're profiling who is of Italian origin. We like to profile like a lot of authors and art. I mean, because I work in the arts, I tend to cater, like I like to promote the arts more than like the business entrepreneur.
Yeah.
You know, I write what interests me, and I have a few contributors that help. Yeah, so it's a fun online magazine, and you know, we're on the social media platforms.
Is it free for people to read, or
absolutely free? And you know, it's for me, it's like a little love project. So sometimes I have time to I put in a lot of times. Other times I feel like I've abandoned it for a couple of months. But it's, you know, so I mean, I've worked as a freelance writer for years, and I had started up some print publications. Like I would be part of the startup team, and as we were getting things rolling, the publisher would decide to stop. And it happened to me twice, and I was like, nah, that's it. I'm creating my own platform. I decide when I'm shutting it down. So, you know, an online magazine is easy to run. I don't have any hard costs. Well, I have some, but very little. Our contributors get honorarium. So it's something I can keep going for very little cost. But I have fun with it. So, you know, I have dreams. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I need to put a little more effort to bring it to the next level. But life gets in the way sometimes. So.
Of course. But now, have you found that with living through COVID, I know that we talked a little bit before we went on the air that, you know, Montreal is kind of, you know, a little bit stricter with the lockdowns and stuff. So have you found time to explore? Like what have you been doing in your, I guess, the quarantine time or in this?
So the weird thing for me is I had planned to release my book last summer, and the plan was I was on a big film shoot, and our last shoot was actually I was like in Spain at the beginning of March.
Really?
So when I left Spain, like 2 days later, the country shut down. So we left just in time. And so my plan was always, okay, when I come back from this was the last big shoot on this particular project, I was going to come home and write the book. And already when we left for Spain, we already knew, I mean, no one was talking about COVID in Canada, but they were talking about COVID in Europe. So I already knew that when I came back, I was going to have to quarantine for 2 weeks, which was fine because I had to get, you know, when I do big writing projects, I feel I have to get into a hermit mode. Well, when I got back, like my province, Quebec, shut down like 3 days after I got back. So I always say I was mentally prepared to quarantine, and I was mentally prepared to stay home because I had to write. The timing could not have been better for me personally. I feel kind of selfish to say, but I had to stay home and write. So that's what I did.
So why did you decide to revisit Malocchio 10 years out and by writing the book?
So the film, I mean, I had a lot of fun with the film. Once it was done, like sort of bringing it around, like I had community screenings in Montreal, different parts of Canada, New York, New Jersey. I came a few times, Boston, even Australia. And it was just one of these things where I was kind of like, wherever I wanted to go, I would contact the Italian organizations there and set up community screenings, and we'd screen, do a Q&A, and you know, I would sell my DVDs, and the Q&As were great because it's I find like the film and hopefully the book now kind of encourages people to share their stories. Perhaps they were not open to telling stories, and then all of a sudden it happened. And it never failed during the Q&A. You know, there's always that awkward pause between like when we stop the film and you're like, does anybody have any questions? The first few minutes, you know, everybody's kind of like, and without fail, it would just take one person sharing their story, and then it was like a volcano erupted. It's like, oh my God. And it'd be great. It was great. So people always ask me what my sequel would be. And I never felt it in me to make a movie sequel, because I was like, all it's going to be is the same film, but more polished. Because, you know, this film was shot on like mini DV. And then as I was nearing the 10th anniversary, I kind of wanted to do something to commemorate it. And then it kind of hit me. I said, I should write a book, because I have all these like, you know, bits of information, anecdotes that didn't make it into the film, because even if it's a documentary, you're still trying to create a storyline. So there was all kinds of things that had no place in the film, but I used to tell people about it during the Q&A, and I was like, it's perfect. So that kind of decided it would be so I consider it like a sequel to the film.
So you wouldn't revisit Malocchio again as a documentary?
Unless something like the proof we all want somehow happens, someone like some expert calls me and says, we can prove it on camera. Maybe then I'll make a film.
So what is next for Agata? Agata, what is next for you? What do you have coming up?
So as a producer, I've got a film coming out actually this summer, but we have a broadcaster in Canada, so it's only going to air on Canadian television. And it's a profile on a Montreal Italian singer-songwriter named Marco Cagliari.
Oh, I love him.
Oh, great. So you know who he is?
I know. So, actually, he was on my radio show years ago.
Oh, fantastic. So Marco is one of these anomalies. Like, he is like a proud Quebecer, born and raised in Montreal to Italian parents. He started his musical career as a teenager, performing in like a heavy metal band, and then decided to switch to Italian language music. And people thought he was nuts, and he made a career out of it. And he's been doing it for 30 years, but he's always struggled, even though, I mean, he's done some big, I mean, he's done some big shows. He's had songs that, you know, have had 1 million hits on YouTube. He has always struggled to sort of be part of the Quebec mainstream. And that's because of language. You know, we have a very complicated history with language politics in this province. So the film looks at his career. He's been doing this for 30 years, even though he's in his 40s. And his one maybe last attempt to break it into the mainstream.
Oh, wow.
That's what we're looking at. So we're, well, we didn't really do any filming during COVID, but we're going to finish up the filming, and we start editing in like a month, and that comes out in the summer. That's going to be fun. And then as a director, I'm hoping my next film, but I've been neglectful of it because just other things have been happening. I am making a documentary film about John Florio. John Florio was a contemporary of William Shakespeare. He had an Italian dad. His mom, we don't really know her story. And some people believe he might be the guy who actually wrote the plays. Some people think he was, some others believe he may have been a mentor to William Shakespeare. Others believe he may have been like an editor of the first folio. So if people know the Shakespeare story, his plays were published after he died, and it's called the first folio. It's like the first time a collection of his plays were put together in print. So I want to look at his story. I want to look at the different theories about his relationship to Shakespeare. That means I'm delving into the Shakespeare authorship question, which is, did William Shakespeare really write the plays? And if he didn't, who did?
But isn't it? But one thing about that didn't they say that Shakespeare had too much of an intimate knowledge of Italy for him? You know, like for somebody that supposedly never went to Italy,
barely. I mean, he lived between Stratford and London. Like he was not a draft.
How was he so intimately?
That's a big question. I mean, the people who are, you know, gun ho that Shakespeare wrote the plays will argue that he was a good listener. That he would, no, I'm serious. You know, he would hang out with these sailors in bars and who traveled the world and would come back with great stories, and he would, you know, turn them into these amazing plays. I've always been a fan of Shakespeare. I love his stuff. I love these theories. I mean, some people say they border on conspiracy theories, but there are holes in Shakespeare's story because there's a lot of unknowns and there's a lot of assumptions. And what got me when I started trying to figure out what this authorship question is that what we're taught in school about Shakespeare's life, a lot of it is assumption. And I was like, that's not what they told me. And I studied Shakespeare in university. No one ever told me that the manuscripts don't exist. Like, you know what I mean? There's all kinds of stuff. So I thought it was fascinating. When I discovered the character of John Florio, he's interesting, like apart from Shakespeare, but then you throw him into the mix of his relationship to Shakespeare, and he's just a great character. So I'm trying to raise money for that. So that, like I said, I hope that's my next film as a director. We'll see. we'll see if I get some. I have to find some cash to
So,
film.
so if somebody, if they want to buy your book, if they want to buy the DVD, what is the best place? What's the best way for them to purchase the DVD?
So redheadproductions.com. I'm selling the book. I am the DVD. I actually stopped selling it on the website because I put it up on YouTube.
Okay.
So I had figured last summer, and actually I was like, during lockdown, people are running out of things to watch. It's been 10 years. I'm putting it on YouTube. But if you go to Redhead Productions, the link to YouTube is there. And then if people are fans of Amazon, the book is on sale, but Amazon.ca. I haven't put it on. I don't know. I haven't put it on .com yet.
Okay.
But Redhead Productions.
If you go, because I bought it right from your website.
Yeah,
so
Redhead Productions.
That's the best place to go, is right to your website, and you get it. And
it
comes fast.
To us, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So that would be so what's the best way people can contact you?
So if you go to if you go to the website, there's a contact, and it's info@redhead. Productions.com. I'm on Instagram, Twitter. One thing I find, people call me like, "Oh, can you cure my malocchio?" No.
So you're a filmmaker. You're not a curer.
I tell them, so my mother did. I mean, part of the filming is she taught me the incantation. So I technically know how to cure it, but I've never tried, just because my mom's around. So I send people to my mom, but what I always respond to people, because I mean, even with the film, I had people, like, "Oh, can you cure it?" I'm like, someone knows how to do it. Start asking around. It's impossible if you're of Italian origin that there's no one in your world that doesn't know how to do it.
But so here's another. I know we're getting back onto the malocchio topic before we conclude the evening. Again, I'm Anthony Scillia, better known as Tony Mangia. We're at the table tonight with Agata De Santis. She is a award-winning filmmaker. She is an author, and if a person doesn't want to learn to do the malocchio, is there just say for example, my cousin is going to teach me how to cure malocchio. I don't want to know it, and they still teach me. Do you still have? Do you still have the power? I mean, is it? You know what I mean?
No, I think
does it have to be part of your you're accepting?
You have to believe that you can cure it. I mean, a reluctant healer is a little weird because you're taking time out of your life to do this, and you have to know the incantations. There is a ritual you have to follow. You should follow up with the person. It's not like a 1 second thing. So, so people need to, if someone wants to teach you, you better be willing to learn it. So in my case, I kind of figure at one point I'm going to start curing it. But I said, right now I have too many people in my life who know how to cure it. So am I being lazy? Yeah, I guess. I said, I can call my mother, an aunt. I've never felt the need, shit, I really need to know how to do this. I call on people. So now some people believe my mother does the cure on herself.
Oh.
So some people believe you can do that. And in my book, I've managed to find a few samples of curing rituals. Some avid believers will say, "Oh, you can't just read it out of a book and know how to do it." But I've met other people who say, no, it's as soon as you learn it and you believe you can do it, go for it. So again, that there's a variation there, right? Some people are more, I always tell the story of when I first started filming. One of my first interviews was with this woman. Her name's Maria, and she was like a close friend of one of my aunts. And my aunt had said, "Oh, I know Maria knows about malocchio." And I said, "Great." So she agreed to be interviewed. We were in her kitchen interviewing her. And it turned out that her mother had taught her. So she was a little reluctant, but her mother taught her. And she felt like, she had 2 kids. She's like, "Oh, I guess I should know how to do it." But she admitted that she was kind of on the fence, but she admitted that she did do the cure on her kids when she felt she needed to. But she didn't publicize the fact that she knew how to do it. So, my aunt was very close friends with her, so she knew. So she's like, yeah, I don't really advertise. And part of it was like, I don't want people calling me. Like, I learned it so that I can take care of my family. So first I did a sit-down interview, and then I had her stand at her kitchen counter, and her ritual includes the olive oil in the water. So I was like, Maria, can you kind of show us step by step on camera how the ritual works? So she starts, she explains, the bowl of water, this and that. And then what I loved was that she had actually, so she did a little faux pas. She had actually written her mother's incantation and kept it. She had a box of recipes, and literally it would be like mom's gnocchi, mom's, eggplant parmesan, mom's malocchio cure. Like somewhere in the middle of the recipe book was a card for the malocchio.
That's kind of awesome, though.
I loved it. Because I was like, I thought you're not supposed to keep this. She's like, oh, So when it came time to doing the incantation, so she had done the olive oil, she takes out the card and she's about to read it. And she kind of stops and says, oh, shit. She's like, I'm not supposed to read this out loud. And I said, but Maria, I thought you were kind of on the fence. And she's like, just in case, I'm sorry, I can't divulge the incantation. So she was taught by her mother, this is like top secret stuff. Others are more open. Others, like my mom had no issue sharing the incantation with, in essence, my readers, like of the book. Like for her, she didn't feel like it was going to take away from her power of healing. But others are very
like a recipe. Sometimes they say like the old Italian ladies, they would always leave out one ingredient when they would share the recipe, or they would they would say instead of like a teaspoon of salt, they say a tablespoon, so the food would be super salty or super sweet.
It's like that great episode of Everybody Loves Raymond with Marie, when her daughter-in-law wants to learn a recipe and she switches one of the herbs.
Do they do that in Canada? The Italian Canadese, do they? No,
I actually find like my mother's generation, they're insisting that we learn the recipes, which I think is great. Their thing is like, you got to know how to make this. Like it can't just be me making this for you. No, I feel there's a voglio, there's a need, a want to share. I haven't met people that are very secretive about their recipes. At least not the people in my world. Yeah.
See, I think in a way maybe you guys are lucky there because you came from you're still close enough to the old country, whereas here in America we've lost, like when when my great grandparents came, they stopped speaking Italian. It was only you have to know English. You have to assimilate into the society. So it's unfortunate that what we know as sometimes as the Italian American experience has gotten watered down a little bit. So we're not so quick to pass on the traditions, unfortunately. Although I see some people my age, if the Italian American podcast, those guys, Pat O'Boyle, John Viola, those guys, they're still trying to do what we can to hold on to our Italian American experience. And that really is important. It's important to pass down the traditions, the recipes. Yeah. Because if we don't, guess what? We're going to lose it.
Yeah. But I also, I've had this conversation with countless people is, the first time you go, so, I'm only, I'm first generation, my parents are immigrants. And the first time I went to Italy, like most people in my situation, there's a bit of there's a shock because as a kid, you thought you were Italian. And then you get to Italy and you're like, oh, I am not Italian. So there are people I know that have like really trouble, like they're very upset about this fact. I see it as the Italian Montreal community is very unique and distinct, even to the other Italian communities in Canada. So when it comes to language, there's a stronger attachment to the language in the Montreal community. And I would argue it's like that with all immigrant communities in Montreal. And that's because the language politics is so in your face in Quebec that my theory is everyone's talking about language that the immigrants are like, oh, we need to protect our language too. So I always joke when I leave Montreal, people are in shock that I speak 3 languages. And I always say, yeah, in Montreal, that's not impressive. A lot of us speak 3 languages in Montreal. We speak English and French, and we speak the language of our ancestors. So I'm like, yeah, I'm not that special in Montreal. But as soon as, I mean, you know, I've been to Vermont where people are like, I don't understand, you speak 3 languages. I'm like, yeah, it's not that special.
But I think that's important, though,
Italian communities in other parts of Canada are not as attached to the language. So, you know, I speak to my mom in Italian. There's aunts and uncles, I only speak to them in Italian. It's not like that in, like, you know, there are people in Toronto who are first generation and their parents did what the Italians did in the US. No, we have to learn English. We have to speak the mother tongue of Canada.
But let me just, I know this is kind of off topic a bit, but what do you mean by language politics? I mean, what does that mean?
Yeah, again, you always assume everybody knows this. So, you know, Quebec is a very French province compared to the rest of Canada. And so there's always been this fight between, you know, Canada has 2 official languages, but most people in Canada are not bilingual. So the majority of French speakers are in Quebec, and they, you know, there was a time where they fought very hard to make French prominent in business, in arts and culture. And so we've been through some weird, like, political fights between the English and the French speakers in Quebec. And really it's because Montreal is unique. The rest of Quebec, if you go into the, you know, smaller communities outside of Montreal in the province, they tend to be a majority French speakers. You know, all the immigrants tend to come to Montreal. So the language politics is just the, you know, Quebec always wants more protection of its language compared to the rest of Canada. Whereas the rest of Canada is like, well, you know, we have 2 official languages, but not really. Not, you know, you don't need to live in Ontario or other provinces and have to speak French. But in Quebec, you need to speak French. And then by default, a lot of us in Montreal speak English as well.
So what you're saying is that they, throughout the whole country of Canada, they want to teach French and English? Is that what I'm under?
Well, it's almost like, because of the unique situation of Quebec,
the whole country
has 2 official languages, but it's not in practice. It's on paper. So
when you go to school, say in British Columbia, because that's on the other side, right? That's on the
other, like, you know, on the West Coast. So
are they learning French and English at school?
They're learning English. I'm sure there are some schools that teach French, but it's absolutely not.
It's more like as a like here we, you know, we in high school we take Italian, or we take Spanish, or we take French as an elective.
Yeah, and you have, like, there is a French speaking, you know, there's a nice a decent sized French speaking community in, like, another province, New Brunswick, which is right next to us on our east side. There's out west, there are a few pockets, but no, I mean, the rest of Canada, you're fine. Just signage, for example, when you're in Quebec, it's all French signs. When you're in the rest of Canada, it's English signs. Like, it's, you have to think that way. And, you know, there are Quebecers that, you know, twice tried to separate from Canada. We had a referendum. They lost both times. But you still have that small contingency of Quebecers who insist that they need to separate from the rest of Canada. We are different, that's for sure. Well, but then I argue with people, like, Montreal is distinct from the rest of Quebec. Like, it's...
Because don't they say Montreal is, like, the most European city in the Americas?
Parts of it, absolutely. I mean, if you go to Old Montreal, you think you're in Europe. It's beautiful. I love it. And it's just, I find, like, I always get annoyed with these, you know, these people that play the language politics, because I'm like, Montreal is unique because of multiculturalism. Every culture has its cultural centers, its restaurants, its cafes. When it's the World Cup, it's not just Italians waving flags, like, it's everybody waving flags of their country. I think it's beautiful. I mean, like I said, depending which neighborhood you're in, you're going to hear that third language spoken commonly. I think it's beautiful. I think it's, but when you think your language, your culture is being threatened, you go into reactionary mode. Yeah. And that I'll argue that's what happened in Quebec. So
That's interesting. You know, because here in America, we don't hear about this stuff.
We can do a whole show on Quebec politics. It's quite fascinating.
But the one thing we didn't talk about, and you're going to have to come back, please. I beg you to come back. We have to talk. We have to talk about food one of these days.
Tony,
we didn't even touch on food.
Right now, it's 8:25. I'm in curfew in Quebec. I cannot leave my home. I have nothing else to do in the evenings.
Okay, so maybe soon, sometime very, very soon, we're gonna do a whole. Because I do want to watch Terra Mia, and I know that you
want to talk about food. Yeah, you need to watch Terra Mia.
I know that you talk about a special cake.
Yeah, there's a great scene.
So we'll tease that episode with saying, you know, if you haven't seen Terra Mia yet, go to redheadproductions.com, buy the DVD, get it, and watch it, and then we're going to talk about it in a couple of weeks. Yeah, how about we do that?
Yeah, you're right. And when we talk about, there's the cake scene. We should definitely show. Yeah, there's a scene where we talk about my mom's traditional birthday cake. Okay. And there's another great scene where we talk about the transferring of tradition. And in that scene, my mother's teaching my youngest brother how to make her famous eggplant parmesan.
You have me sold.
No, I love that scene, and I love it because whenever we've shown it, I've had people be like, "Can you write down the recipe?" Because obviously, you do see the steps, but you're not going to see, the ingredients on
that. Is a cookbook maybe another?
I won't lie. I'm already thinking about my next book. I have the working title, and it will include recipes.
Okay.
It won't just be recipes.
But it'll because
there's a chance that my mother's eggplant parmesan recipe will make it into that book. Because it's fabulous. It's a fabulous recipe.
And that's another thing. You see, we can keep on going because I would like to talk about eggplant parm because how do you make eggplant parm in Canada? Like, how does your mom make it?
My mom makes it. It's like a layered lasagna almost.
But is it? Are you frying the eggplant with breadcrumbs?
She slices them in very thin slices and she fries them.
With breadcrumbs?
She'll do the flour and egg and wait, is the breadcrumbs? No, she just does flour and egg and fries it.
Okay.
And then it's layers. It's like tomato sauce, minced meat, eggplant. The order is wrong, but grated mozzarella cheese, Parmesan, and tomato sauce again. And I think she does 3 layers. And it's like a big casserole. It's a great dish. Even better as a leftover.
Usually like the next day. It's even in the middle of the night. You're hungry. You go downstairs. You get the
thing I tell people. The trick is, the tomato sauce. Like she makes. We every September. We make the tomatoes preserved. So it's not like store-bought tomato sauce.
There is even that scene in Malocchio when
exactly. Oh my God, I forgot about that. Yeah. There's the scene where my brother's talking to. So my brother and my mother always end up in my films. It's just they're great. They're also great on camera. Yeah, my youngest brother, who is the biggest non-believer, I put him in a situation with 2 avid believers, my mom and my Aunt Franca. And instead of just sitting there, they were peeling the tomatoes to make the preserves. And I had him question them about this crazy belief. And he was like, he's also great, especially with my aunt at poking her in the right places. So it's a great scene. But yeah, I was kind of like, I don't want them just sitting around. I want them doing something.
But that's even a great, in almost subconsciously, it's a way of passing on a tradition by talking about another tradition.
Yeah, I mixed the two. And the thing is, it wasn't a setup for the film. It was the weekend where we were making the tomato sauce.
So you see, but that's like, what would you say? That's like providential that you were filming this.
Well, scene. I was like, Mom, when are we doing the tomato sauce? Because I'm.
So you had a.
Yeah, I'm like, if anything, the film crew, we slowed them down that day because they wanted to like go faster, and I was like, and it was a beautiful day, so we did it in the backyard. Yeah, that's a great scene. People love
I even like when you see like the stacks of the crates of tomatoes in the background.
Yeah. Because we do. I mean, if the weather's nice, we all are in Montreal. It's like the sort of harvest is early September for the tomatoes. So usually we have nice weather, so it's not too cold, it's not too hot. We're doing it outdoors.
How's the weather by you now? That's it's totally off topic.
Today. So we've had a mild winter, very little snow. We had our first snowstorm last weekend, which is weird. We have a little bit of snow. It's going to start getting cold, but we haven't, one thing I'm annoyed with my fellow Montrealers is we're becoming wussy because it's like -10 and people are complaining. And I'm like, guys, like as kids, -20 is the weather in January and February. Like, come on, guys.
Wait. Oh, but you're going by Celsius, right?
Sorry, Celsius. Sorry.
Yeah.
So tell you what it is in Fahrenheit.
No, so the 0 is 32. 0 Celsius is 32 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's probably like in the teens, I guess.
Right now we're in we're like 20s.
So that's
today, but that's not like, to me, that's not cold. I'm sorry. I was born and raised in Montreal.
It's in your blood.
Oh my God. I find I'm at that age. I'm in my 40s. I'm at that age where I talk about like when I was a kid, there were snowstorms and blizzards, and they would send us to school. Now they announce like an inch of snow, and they're like, the kids have to stay home. And I'm like, I couldn't even see a foot in front of me, and I was off to school. We've all become wusses in this. It's weird because we have the extreme weather. Eh? We have really hot and humid in the summer, really cold in the winter, which is like we have the 4 seasons. Like we experience sometimes in a day. That's the joke in Montreal. It's all about wearing layers. But yeah, we've become wusses when it comes to weather. I have so little patience with my fellow Montrealers.
I think on that note.
On a great note, I tease them all the time.
Oh man! But again, Agata, I want to thank you. This has been a blast.
Fun. Thank you.
No, thank you. But seriously, I'm gonna email you.
Okay, absolutely. We can spend a whole episode talking food.
Yes.
Do I have to take out some of my mom's recipes? Is that what we have to do?
No, you don't have to. If you want to talk about, so here I'll give you some homework.
Yes.
Kind of, maybe ask your mom some, what is, the famous or the specialties of her area of
that I know. Our pasta, it's cavatelli. That's our
but made with
homemade cavatelli. She uses ricotta, but not everybody does.
Okay, so yeah, so these are things you have to. This is your homework. Find out, some of the specialties of Castel Grande. And then maybe some, because like we say here we have Italian American dishes, so for us it's like lasagna, meatballs and macaroni. So are there some special
you call it gravy or tomato sauce?
We call it tomato sauce. I call it tomato sauce.
Okay, good. That's one thing. I love my fellow Italians in America, but when you guys say gravy, I'm like
I mean, but again, I think that was a term that came out of the original immigrants that came here.
Yeah, and then I think The Sopranos just brought it into the next level. Yeah,
it became more of like a mainstream word, gravy, but yeah, I mean, gravy I put on my turkey, on my roast beef.
Also in Quebec, gravy is, it's the dark gravy we put on our poutine. That's also
I love that stuff.
Oh, so good.
But for here I show like Mamma Mia. Here in Jersey, we have something called disco fries, which is a take on it's not poutine or poutine. It's French fries, gravy, and they melt mozzarella cheese, or they can melt American cheese.
It's really about these cheese curds that are very specific. Like, it's almost like I don't think in Quebec we do anything with them except either eat them raw as is or put them on poutine. I think, like, I don't know the origins of these cheese turds, but they seem to only be used for poutine.
So what's the proper poutine? Is the proper way of saying it?
In French, it's poutine.
Okay, I know we're not here, but in America it's like poutine. I don't know if that's
you kind of anglicize it, but yeah, in French it's poutine.
Oh, so poutine would be the
anglicized, yeah.
See, I'm learning something.
Well, see, the other thing we do in Montreal is I can easily mix like French and English in a sentence, and it, we do like I have to sometimes like this morning I had a meeting with someone in Calgary, and we're talking about location scouting, and I was about to talk about a dépanneur so the corner store in Quebec is called the dépanneur in French. The English speakers in Montreal, we don't even say dépanneur, we say dep. Anybody outside of Montreal, if you say I'm heading to the dep to get some milk, they're going to be like, what is wrong with you? Like, what language are you speaking? So we've done this in Montreal. That's why we're so unique is the English speakers, there's all kinds of French terms we throw into our, we don't say a happy hour. We say a 5 à 7, which is in French, a 5 to 7.
Oh.
But if you, it's so part of our vocabulary that if I'll talk to you about going to a 5 à 7, I have to remind, I'm like, shit, he has no idea what that is. And then I have to think about what the English word is. I'm like, what is a 5 à 7 in English? And I'm like, oh, happy hour. Yeah.
But even like, again, the Italian American, we have our own language.
Your own lingo.
Yeah.
Even Italians here, there are French terms or English terms that are now part of the Italian Montreal vocabulary when Italians speak, and there's terms they use that we've created in Montreal, but when we speak in Italian, but it's not an Italian word, but it's it's now.
But you know what it means.
We know what it means in Montreal when we're talking in Italian, but if they call, there's a local comedian named Guido Grasso, and he talks a lot. He has this great skit about when his mom calls like her relative in Italy, and he's like, the relative in Italy has no idea what she's talking about because she's throwing in all these words because she's been in Montreal for like all her adult life, and he's like, Matt, they have no idea what you're talking about.
It's funny. It's funny because my wife's family there, my wife's first generation, she was born here. Her parents were from Sicily, but like when her nonna talks, like they say like baga for bag or cake for cake.
Yeah. Or here, like they'll talk in Italian and say like, devo andare al garage. What the hell is that? In Italian, Italy can be like, what the hell is a garage? Yeah.
Or supermarket, they say, or Broadway, or just.
Oh
just
my
like
God, it's hilarious. It's cute. I mean, it's cute because it's almost like they've adapted some of the terminology from, in essence, my mom's been here over 50 years. It's normal. She will have picked up some terms and sort of mixed it up in her Italian lingo. Yeah.
So Agata, that's your homework.
All right.
So we'll after I watch the film, I'm gonna message you, and we're gonna.
There's two great scenes. I totally. If we want to show them, they're fun, and don't watch them on an empty stomach though, because you will be hungry.
But again, so the best way that you could reach Agata, you could buy her DVDs, her brand new book. Go to redheadproductions.com. That's redheadproductions.com on the bottom of the screen, and you could check her out. And again, the best way to reach you said was info@redheadproductions.com.
Correct. Yeah.
Yep, that was actually somebody asked that question as well.
That's the best way to reach me.
So Agata, again, I want to thank you so much. This has been a blast. And again, I told you, I said, we'll go for about an hour. an hour and 40 minutes later, we're still here. But I've loved every minute of this. This is what At the Table with Tony's about. It's not about saying, okay, Agata, and the next question is...
No, I love it. To know it was great.
I like to have a conversation, I wish we could be in person enjoying, some eggplant parm or a piece of that amazing birthday cake.
Yeah, I won't lie. I'm a big fan of Manhattan, and I'm starting to suffer withdrawal. I hope one day soon.
So when we're allowed to travel again, and if I ever come up by you or you come by me, we will break bread. But until then, we will be together very soon back here at the Table with Tony.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Agata. Again, I am Anthony Scillia, better known as Tony Mangia. This has been a blast. I want to thank Agata for joining us, and we'll see you next time.